You are listening to Able Radio, simplifying productivity for small business owners everywhere. If you are looking for 1% improvements that add up to big results, this is the place for you. Every week, we learn about simple systems and tools that will help you build the business and life you've always wanted. Now here's your host, Zachary Sexton.
Welcome to Able Business Radio. My name is Zachary Sexton, and today I have a very, very cool woman. Really excited to actually have a conversation recorded. We've been chatting a lot recently, but Miss Susan Lannis, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So happy to have you on. We met a few months back at the National Association of Professional Organizers, and it was a very impromptu meeting. We happened to get on the same elevator, and then as we walked out of the elevator, we then had maybe a 25, 30-minute conversation, exchanged each other's phone numbers so we could continue the conversation, and it's been very, very interesting. So a little bit of background for people who don't know you as well as I know you. You've been in business for 30 years. And we'll talk about this too, you own your job, and one of your jobs is a professional organizer. That's changed over the years. Right now you work with, I believe you say, gifted individuals, highly gifted individuals, help them get their genius out into the world. But you've gone through a whole sweep of things, usually within business though, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
And you also have a photography business. You just told me, because I asked how you want me to intro you, that right when you graduated college, you drove all the way across the country and went as far as you could, ended up in Portland, Oregon from Connecticut, where you still live. So, Susan, we have something to talk about. You've been in business for 30 years. That's not very common. Actually, I think statistics would say the 2 to 5 year mark is when a lot of people end up burning out. And I have you on because you've actually given a presentation on this and just know a lot about it from personal experience, how to be successful in business without the burnout. So I'm excited to jump in. I know the one thing that you wanted to talk about was the difference in the different, if a business is actually a business or not. So maybe we can start there.
Sure. It's one of the critical things is to know what you actually want to own. And the definitions I use are, you can own a hobby, which means there's something you love to do. You get paid to do it, but ultimately the money doesn't matter. So an example of that might be a wife and mother who enjoys organizing, but just does it on the side when time allows, and has a husband who earns the living that's the main revenue source for the household. So they're doing it, they're being paid to do it, but the money doesn't matter. It's a hobby. And there's lots of hobbyists out there that are earning money. And then, like myself, you can own your job. And the difference there is the money does matter. This has been my full-time living for my entire life of career. The money matters, but there's a lack of, there's a desire to have a little more freedom about your time and a lack of interest in managing other people. In other words, your vision is really to just kind of work on your own, maybe a little support here and there, but no desire to have a full-blown business where you're a manager and you've got employees and all the rest of it, which is then the next step up, which is wanting to own a business. If your desire is to have employees and build something substantial that you want to live beyond your lifetime or your career, you probably want to be owning a business. And the last one is that you can be an entrepreneur. And the definition of that is that what you love is to create the business, then sell it off, and then start another business. Serial entrepreneurs. Elon Musk could be considered a true entrepreneur if you look at all the major entities that he has created. And yeah, he maybe keeps his fingers in, but his real joy is developing all these different things into different companies and different industries. So that's kind of the true entrepreneur. So the first piece of just understanding is what you really want, how much time do you want to spend on it, and how much money do you need to make? What's enough?
When and we can actually take the example of a professional organizer, because I think that's what you know, and it's a good microcosm of service professionals in general, people who sell their expertise and their time for money. If you were talking with someone and you were trying to figure that out for them, what kind of questions would you ask, or how would you lead them to figure out, is this a hobby? Is this a job? Is this an entrepreneurial thing? How would you help them?
Well, the hobby question is, does the money matter? Is it just extra? Owning your job, the question is, how much money do you need, and how do you want to spend your time? Do you have that interest in managing people or not? In other words, it's really just knowing that long-term vision of what it is you are creating. And I knew all along I wanted to work on my own. I came out of a small business environment where I was a manager, and I did it well, and I was good at it, but it wasn't where the joy came from for me. I always had a lot more fun creating new systems and coming up with new ways for that business to operate than I did managing the other employees and what they needed to do. Because I was this really creative person, I often got moved into those management because they wanted the ideas, but ultimately I just knew myself that I enjoyed the hands-on work and coming up with creative ideas and implementing them over managing other people. And then the entrepreneur thing, when you're an entrepreneur, because you're just full of ideas. Just like, okay, I got this one done. I got it going. Somebody else, now let me go get something else.
When you started out 30 years ago, what did your job look like, and what does it look like now?
At the very beginning, well, this is its own story. I really didn't start my business. My business started itself. I found myself in a situation of office politics where I came out on the short end of the stick, and I cried for a couple of days, and then I went to Kelly Girl to find something to do till I figured out my next career move. And I went out on my first Kelly Girl assignment.
And what's Kelly Girl?
Kelly Girl was this temp agency back in the day.
Okay.
And at the end of the day of working the manual bookkeeping system, a salesman came in with a new computer. So I'll date myself. It was a K-Pro 5.5-inch floppy disk, top of the line, monochrome, not even WYSIWYG screen. Not even the what you see is what you get kind of screen. Mm-hmm. But the owner stands there talking to this computer salesman going, geez, now I don't know what I'm going to do. I let go of my account. I let go of my bookkeeper. I don't know anything about accounting. I don't know anything about computers. And he suddenly turned around and looked at me and said, do you know anything about this stuff? And my mouth said, yes, but not through Kelly. That was the critical piece, not through Kelly. He said, oh, what would you charge? And I tossed a fee out, and that's how my business started. Literally 2 weeks after what I thought was going to be my lifetime career was over. And so, what did I do? I started organizing I did what I'd always done at my prior employment situations. I started coming up with creative ideas to make the work simpler, faster, easier, and make it flow. To make everything just move more quickly, make it more efficient, get rid of the stressors. And in watching how that owner was responding to what I was doing, it was like, oh, this is it. Here, the universe works in amazing ways. It was like, I didn't have to look any further for what I needed to do. He allowed me to see the fact that at that time, accountants did not know computers, and computer technicians did not know accounting processes, and I knew them both. So there was a place for me, was that being that bridge between technology and the accounting processes. Except because I'd been an operations manager, I knew all the other stuff that went on in the office environment as well. So I started working only with businesses for that reason. I felt they were more long-term lucrative, and that's where my skill set was. I had come out of a management position. So I used to organize files and organize desks, and I would set up computer systems. I would set up accounting systems, and my ability to just untangle knots was just, I would find that first customer. I found out his bookkeeper had been embezzling, and two, she had been paying taxes to a state that they should not have been paying taxes to. So I ended up getting him like $15,000 in tax refunds that covered covered a huge chunk of my costs for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Just how to untangle and look at things and smooth them out, make them work more simple, make everything simpler, faster, and easier. Which is another story, but I'm not going to get into it because we won't have time to get to these 3 keys if I keep telling stories.
I want to, but I agree. I agree. We can move on.
We can stick it at the end if there's time. How's that?
Wonderful. All right. So that you tell the difference by just thinking about it. What
do they want?
Goal? What is the vision? What do you need from this? So have the end in mind at first, and when you know that, you can what? What happens? Okay, let's say I want a job or I want a business.
You make better decisions all along the line. If your goal is to own your job, then what you have to do is, all right, I'm going to take one quick step back. There's 3 critical areas of a business that have to be managed and balanced to be successful. You have to understand the finances, you have to understand the marketing and manage it, and you have to understand technology. And what I mean by technology is the skill set of what it is, the skill of the product that you're developing or the service that you're providing. So for me, it's the organizing and productivity is the technology that I have to study. So you got to balance those 3 things. They look different on each of those things. So for example, if you're at a hobby, you're going to have a really strong level at the technology, but you're less, even though you'll have to do some, you're not as tied into the finances and the marketing because the money doesn't matter. If you're owning your job, then you really do have to balance all 3 of those things, but you're always going to be stronger in the technology. But you cannot ignore the marketing and the finance if you're going to succeed. If you're running a business, then if that's the goal of where you're headed, then you're going to start bringing in people to handle the pieces that you don't handle well, because that's what you want to do. Whereas the job, it's like, okay, I got to learn something about finance, handling the finance side. I have to learn about handling the marketing side. For the business, it's like I got to find the right person who can do the marketing. I got to find the right person who's going to do the finances, and you balance them that way. And similar with the entrepreneur, except they're doing it in a serial fashion where they're starting and selling and starting and selling and starting and selling.
Then,
you know where you're at. You know what you need to do. So if you're owning your job, you're not planning to hire anybody. You might be looking for virtual assistants, for example, to maybe just do a few random things here and there, but you're going to be doing the yeoman's work on that job. So you are going to have to start educating yourself about marketing and finances.
And then there's 3 keys. So we've gotten to the baseline. So if you're going to be in business, if you're going to either own your job, be in business, be an entrepreneur, a little bit less so for a hobbyist, but still not completely. You need to understand the finances, the marketing, and the technology. Yeah. That's a lot. And I know from somebody, personal experience, who's maybe started his business 7 months ago, it can be really overwhelming. And even now, we've got so many tools and technology and resources and books and courses, and there's a lot at your fingertips in order to make this easy. So I think the fact, I would say I've benefited from that, but it can be a little bit overwhelming. Then there's how do I balance this all? Especially when something's new, the first time you do it, it takes a lot more time. Like even sending somebody an invoice on PayPal. The first time you do that, it's going to take you a lot longer because you got to put the template together until that, or setting up a scheduler. If that's something, if you're a service professional and you need to sell your time, you need to be careful about when you allocate that time so people can book you at hours that work for you. Or all these little things have such high startup cost mentally and a little bit energetically. It's easy to get run down pretty quickly, and it's easy to work 12 hours a day. I guess maybe, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's where I'm a little bit wanting to get your long-term perspective on how we avoid the burnout, while the short term we do have to expend a lot of energy.
Yeah, there is a lot of upfront investment, no matter which one of those you are doing. Part of it is assessing your own skill set. If you had to give yourself a score of 1 to 10 on where you are with understanding marketing, where you are with understanding finances, I don't know anyone that ever started a business who didn't have the technology down, that didn't know what it was they were producing as a product or selling. It's the other two that are the issue. So it's like, okay, then just figuring out the investment. I mean, I was fortunate in the fact that I had a computer background, an accounting background, as well as an innate ability to organize, which now the story's coming back again. I spent now I've got to say it, because I spent my whole childhood figuring out the simplest, fastest, easiest way to get things done, because I grew up in a family of 5 kids and we had chores, and you had to, make your bed and do your, help with the dishes and help my mom cook meals. And we had lots of things we had to do, and I was just constantly figuring out the quickest way to get it done because I wanted to be lazy. I have this odd combination of being responsible and loving to be responsible and loving to be lazy. And the only way for me to reconcile those two qualities in me was to figure out the simplest, fastest, easiest way to meet the responsibility so that I could have the freedom of the time. And I was doing it with Barbie doll clothes when I was 3 and 4. When I was 5 years old, I was looking at puzzles and I would see patterns. I noticed that we had all these cardboard puzzles that had like 10, 12, 15 pieces. They were a big thing when I was a kid. And with 5 kids in the family, we had a lot of them. But I would dump them. And I figured out that there was only about 5 different die casts that were used to cut those puzzles. So the pictures were all different, but there was only about 5 sets of pieces in all of them. And so I would dump 20, 30 puzzles out, and I would assemble them just on the shape of the pieces.
So it wouldn't make a very good picture.
Right, disregarding the picture, just the pieces, and then I would redo them to put them into the photo. Then I would do the image side of it. But I was just that kind of pattern thinker. So for me, some organizers learned the skill. For me, it was kind of just an innate outcome of my need to both be responsible and lazy. Because I couldn't be lazy until I met my responsibilities. So that's a benefit to me. But, so everyone's different. When they're sitting there trying to figure out the 12 hours, I really was lucky in the fact that I had background in all 3 of these areas. So my need to spend time in all of them was maybe less than other people. Marketing was the big unbalance for me, was figuring out the marketing. And you and I have kind of talked about that one a little bit. Find the ones, you can speak, you can write, you can do social media, you can do public relations, and you can do networking. That's the one I hate. That's the one I keep forgetting. So you can write, I'll say those more slowly. You can write, you can speak, you can network, you can do public relations, and you can do social media. Those are the 5 avenues. I had to figure out which 2 or 3 of those avenues were comfortable for me and that worked for me, and drop the ones that didn't. So for me, it became PR and speaking were my 2 strongest suits, and networking was a terrible avenue for me. I wasn't any good at it. It was challenging. It took a lot of time. And I finally said, I don't need to do this channel. My other channels are working. So part of the answer to the 12 hours is to experiment with lots of different things and quickly assess as quickly as you can which one's working, and then arrow towards that one, because that allows you to start sloughing off all of the things you think you need to learn and lets you begin to focus on the ones that actually work for you.
That's so helpful. And we did have this conversation a while back, and I'd been thinking about it. And just this morning, actually, I made an Excel tracker of the various areas where I'm getting most of my leads and referrals from. I think I'm going to just put podcasting and the public speaking one because I don't
Yeah.
know, I'm speaking. I sort of think of it as networking because I get to meet really interesting people or connect more deeply with interesting people like you. But I'm going to be tracking that to accurately assess not only how many leads come in, but then how many of them turn to prospects, and then how many of those turn to offers, and how many of those turn to clients, and then did I get paid for what it is? And I think understanding, at least what you gave me a few weeks ago, is that understanding that you don't have to be everywhere. And I if people have ever heard of Gary Vaynerchuk or Pat Flynn, they have this strategy. It's like, you got to be everywhere. You got to do everything. If it's not Snapchat, if you're not snapping, you're not living. Good on them for having that kind of energy. But I do feel like they're promoting a lifestyle and an idea that happened to work for them that doesn't necessarily work for everybody. And finding your area of genius, which you already pattern recognition was that, and then explaining that via speaking and writing and a little bit to public relations, which is essentially more writing. That worked for you. So that's awesome advice. And I don't know how to transition over because I actually don't know how deeply you go in or what these keys even mean. You gave me an outline.
Well, we haven't even started the keys.
You've got 3 keys. Unless you have anything else to add to that, can we dive into the first one? Because the first one is differentiation, which kind of feels like what we're talking about, but I don't know where you're going with it. So
it is a little bit similar to what we're talking about. Basically, there are 4 basic marketing strategies, not methods, strategies. You can be a price leader. Who's that?
Oh, that's
Walmart.
what this is. Okay.
You can be a focus leadership. You can be unfocused, and you can be differentiated. So a focused leadership is you do one thing and only one thing. An unfocused strategy is that you try to be all things to all people. These only work in major corporations. They have the wherewithal to have the employees, the staff, the ideas, the development department, all of those things to tackle any one of those 3 strategies. The 4th strategy is the only one that works when you're a small business, and that's differentiation. And that means figuring out what makes you different than everybody else in the marketplace and then focusing on that. So there's lots of ways that you can differentiate yourself. It can be the design or your image. If you were to look at my current business card, you'd see that I have like this little focus tunnel with the word chaos all jumbled up in the funnel. And then at the bottom, so it's liberate time by turning chaos into clarity. And so the chaos comes down, it turns into clarity. So there's a design component that speaks to what I do that makes me different in the marketplace. I don't organize closets. I turn chaos into clarity in the business market. So that's one way. Another is the technology that you use. In other words, literally the skill. Again, we're not talking electronics. We're talking the technology, the skill set of what you're doing. So even at the beginning for my business, I only worked with businesses. Now that's a very tiny differentiation, but the truth of the matter is, at the time I started, the vast majority of organizers were either doing residential or they were doing both. So it was a differentiation that I focused only on business. You can do it through the features of what you offer. You can do it through the customer service level that you offer. You can do it through a dealer network of how you get your products out if you happen to be a product developer. But what you want to do is look at as many different dimensions as you can and figure out how you can continue to differentiate yourself. So a minute ago, you alluded to the fact, when I started my business, I literally named my company Organization Plus because I'd never heard of organizing as a business. And so I stuck the plus on the back end of it to cover anything else I had to do to earn a buck. Because I honestly didn't know if organizing was, even going to fly. I was just looking at what was going on around me and my experience on that with that first client and going, that's what I'm doing. I'm organizing. So let's see what happens with this. Now, so I organized anything in the business environment. That was my only qualifier. So I designed files and I organized desks and I helped people with time management and I wrote employee manuals and I mean, just 1,000 different things. I even had a candy shop that I organized, and the owner had a box full of silk and dried flowers that she had purchased and then didn't know how to turn it into an arrangement for the wall. I organized that. I literally took that box of floral stuff and turned it into a floral arrangement for her wall, because to me it was organizing. Now I work only with gifted adults who own businesses, and I help them untangle their ideas and help them implement them so that they actually go from thought to implementation. So very, very different, evolved all along the way. So differentiation, that's key number one. Know what makes you different and keep making yourself different in as many ways as you can.
Do you have any strategies for making that happen, or maybe a story that you went through, you're like, oh, I'm really unique at this? Because a previous conversation we had, you said it's about every 7 years you reinvent yourself. So this has happened 3-4 times, where right now you're working with gifted adults. When that differentiation piece comes in, what are some like good guidelines or good rules for people to think of there?
Well, you're basically looking at your competitors. You're looking at either your direct competitors or the other choices available to your potential customers. So, for example, this is the trouble with talking to someone who's been in business for 30 years. They have to keep going back in time. This is the
benefit of having a conversation with somebody.
It was a differentiation to be able to go into the office and actually do the work. That was a huge differentiation for me, because back at that time, if you were a business with productivity challenges or time management challenges, your options were to go to a workshop, buy a book, or pay a consultant who would tell you what you should do. Nobody was walking into the environment learning how that individual thought, worked, and functioned, and then designing a method around who they were. And both methods can work. Some people do just fine going to a seminar. They get enough out of it, and that's enough for them. But there's a significant chunk who need the personalized scenario. So that was a huge differentiation. So but that was my competition. My competition was seminars, books, and consultants. So it was a differentiation that I didn't just tell people how to organize. I went into their environments and I physically did it with them, which is a transference of skills, which is a key component of what organizing is versus cleaning. We're not cleaning, we're organizing, because we're designing systems and we are customizing based on the individual. And we're transferring our skills to our clients.
Is that still your competition, or are there new competitors?
Well, no, of course not. Now there's hundreds and thousands of organizers all over the country doing organizing work. And of course, the internet has become a huge resource, because now you can watch videos and listen to audio programs, and you've got 1,000 other channels to learn it. But you know what? It's still a differentiation to be able to go into the environment and work one-on-one with that individual and help them figure out what's the method that's going to work for them. Because we're not all the same. And what works for one person is not going to work for another individual. And unless you've got someone kind of holding your hand and helping you think through that process, then you're trying to fit yourself. It's kind of like the square peg in the round hole. When you're trying to do what you learned in a seminar or a product that was designed to help you, it can be very hard to fit yourself into that. I remember working with a client. I worked with a designer, a home designer, a bunch of years ago now. But she had, I think we liberated 12 different paper planning systems out of her office space. she wanted to do better with time, and she tried the Covey system, and she tried the Franklin system, and she tried she had all these different systems that she tried, but the real issue was none of those systems functioned the way she thought. And I was able to help her find the right tool that allowed her to do the planning with a tool that worked the way she naturally thought. And so that's the kind of the difference there between that key differentiation of doing it for you and with you in your office space versus trying to get it from a seminar or a book. Other ways to get differentiation, just you looking at what your competition is doing and saying, geez, you know what, I do it this way. So, in the beginning, right from the beginning, I was able to say, I come in and work with you to actually implement. I would say things like, I can come in and we will design a system based on how you naturally work, think, and function. That was a key phrase for me in my early marketing ventures, because that was a critical differentiation. So just keep looking at the competition. What are they not doing that you're kind of doing naturally?
So to recap, you've got a hobby, job, business, or you're an entrepreneur. And for all three of those, especially for job, business, and entrepreneur, you need to be thinking about your finances, your marketing, and your technology. Differentiation is what you do a little bit in your technology, but it drives a lot of your marketing, which will then have a positive impact on your finances. And that's just done by checking out the competition, knowing what your own natural strengths are, and identifying what people need and attempting to give that to them in a good way. And the quicker you can differentiate yourself, or the more strongly you can differentiate yourself, the easier time you're going to have, because you're probably doing things that are naturally in alignment with how you like to function. You're a natural problem solver and systems thinker and pattern seer. So doing that doesn't seem all that hard for you, and it's also a way where people are like, oh, I want that. So your marketing efforts are working a little bit better.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct. And it's also the key to long-term success, because you can differentiate your entire career. I've been differentiating myself for 30 years, constantly refining. Some of the things you can look at is, how have you evolved? The things I know now are far beyond what I knew when I started. So you can look at what have you learned to keep that differentiation rolling over time. What have you learned? What has changed around you? Have your needs changed? Maybe you started out thinking you wanted a job, but you've suddenly gotten to a point where you suddenly realize, maybe I do want a business. Maybe I do want to manage other people. So those are some other ways to keep looking at that differentiation. You're going to keep changing over time. You know more, you do more. You begin to see what clients you enjoy working with. Who are the fun clients? Who are the not so fun clients? That's why do we own businesses? So we can make our own choices about what we do with our time and who we work with. Mm-hmm. So all of that falls into that differentiation category.
That's wonderful.
So that's why that's a key to keep.
I had a friend over for like a 3-day entrepreneurial retreat, we called it. Even though I'd say at the moment we both own our jobs. He's looking more in the business direction. I'm actually, after talking with you, somewhat happy, at least at the moment, with the job. I do have a virtual assistant that helps me out with some graphic design, because I'm terrible at that. But right now I'm enjoying owning my own job and choosing who I get to work with and how I get to work with them. And that was one thing he prompted me. He asked me, he's like, well, what are the last few clients that you've had, and like who's been really successful? And him asking that question really got me clear on, oh, this is the type of person, that person who loves to help other people, the person who really has a hard time saying no because they don't want to disappoint anybody, and fall into that trap of overextending themselves because they just can't say no, and they just keep on piling things on, either their own ideas that they would love to do or requests that people have of them. Understanding that and seeing that personality makes it much easier for me. And if I talk with people, they can like, oh, I know somebody like that. It's much more specific, where productivity, Ooh, and even for me, it is business productivity as well. That's not enough. You really got to get a lot clearer on the who and the how and the. I already knew my why because, man, did I struggle with this, and I love teaching things that helped fix my problems in the past. So I couldn't agree more, and I like that. A recent example makes me feel like I'm heading in the right direction.
Good. Shall we jump to key number 2?
Let's do key number 2.
Innovation. So this is the best strategy to find new markets and to keep existing customers. That's the definition of innovation. So what you want to do is you got to keep looking at what you're doing and make incremental changes in how you do it. You can improve the quality. You can improve the delivery. You can improve the value of existing products. Those are all avenues for looking at what you do. You can keep doing new things all the time. Keep bringing in something new. Add new products or services. Kind of launching off of what you were just saying about how you now have this nice little vision of this person who's overwhelmed because they can't say no. Maybe 6 months from now, you're going to find another really fun client who doesn't fit that. Mm-hmm. They have their own definition of who that person was, and now suddenly, okay, now I can expand my business because I have this second market that I can attack, and so that's innovation, looking at new products and services, because maybe what you do with the second person is not the same type of thing you do with the first person. Increase your market budget so you have continuous communication with your market, and listen to them to find clues. Always listen to your customers. Are they inadvertently telling you a new idea of something you should be offering?
I would like to actually dive a little deeper into
Sure.
that, because I think it's something easy to gloss over. How have you done it over the years? What are some of the most successful ways you've listened to your customers to drive innovation?
Well, too bad this is audio, but I'll give you an example of a series of incremental innovations. So when I would work with my customers, I used to come up with all these sharp, memorable little sayings like "stop the paper pileup," STOP, schedule it, toss it, organize it in the filing system, or pass it on. How to deal with it. And I would say them. And I kept seeing my clients writing them down because they were sharp, they were simple, they were always just 3 or 4, and I always tied them to a word or something that made it simple to recall what they were. But I kept seeing them write them down. So then I started writing them down. So I could say, you don't need to write down, I've got it, I'll write it down. Because I wouldn't necessarily use all of them with every customer, but I was always using some of them with every customer. Then I thought, well, this is silly. I really am saying these things all the time. So I put them onto paper, and I would have them with me, and I would just kind of like hold them up. Then I innovated it again by, I thought, you know what, I'll just make this a packet. So I started putting them on paper, and I started putting them in a clear folder with my business name on them, and every customer got one of those file folders with all of those sayings in it. And at the end of the appointment, we would take the 2 that had the strongest implication for them, and I'd put them to the outside so they could see the 2 that mattered the most. So when they picked up the folder, the 2 they wanted to see most were there. Then I started branding them. Then I started bringing in my logos and other things. So see this constant little, okay, it started with me noticing that they kept writing them down, but over the time, they kept evolving and evolving and evolving. So that's a good example of both incremental change and innovation that came from paying attention to what my customers were doing. They were loving those short expressions. So I developed more of those short expressions, evolving from the customer and innovating.
And listening. And in this case, it was listening to the reactions that people were having about that. So I think a very, maybe the world I come from, it would be like, well, send a survey or something like that. But man, if you're working with somebody, just noticing, oh, this really seemed to click for people, or probably shouldn't do that one anymore. That didn't seem to be something that resonated.
And listening. I used to do speaking was one of my main marketing methods. The first time I got a comment card back that said I would have paid for this, that's when I started speaking for a fee. I spoke free to market myself until someone said, geez, I would have paid for that. And I went, all right, here's my fee structure. And that's when I added speaking for fee as a revenue stream. So yeah,
Wonderful.
another quick example.
Wonderful. I've been reaching out to folks to give this talk that I put together on an email as a way to market myself, and I hadn't been getting much traction with it. And then last week, I got 2 requests from different companies for a paid workshop. I was like, well, okay, this seems to be a little bit better because I can still teach the things that I want to teach and get paid for it. So that's great, and potentially get a client or 2 out of it. Wouldn't be as focused on getting it, but hey, it can always happen. Cool. All right. So we've got differentiation, and the differentiation, it seems like innovation feeds that too. That it's almost a feedback loop or a cycle there.
The difference is that differentiation is focused on how you market yourself, and innovation is focused on what you offer your clients.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, so it's the what you call the technology.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the last key we have here is renewal.
This is the real biggie when it comes to how do you keep from burning out with your business. And I've watched many people get tired and burned out over the years. So the point is, if you're not having fun and feeling good about what you're doing, what's the point? If you've gotten to that point where it's drudgery to go to your office, that you can't stand the idea that you've got another new client you have to go to access, you're in trouble. So you've either got to shift, or how do you stay away from it? Well, there's basically 6 elements that you have to kind of pay attention to. One is, how much risk are you taking? And you'll see these things are all implemented. If you are doing today exactly what you were doing 5 years ago to exactly the same marketplace, you're not taking any risk. You're not trying new things. You're not experimenting. So taking risk is a component of keeping renewed with your business. Setting goals. We all hear this 1,000 times, that the importance of setting goals. This is one of the reasons goals are important, because your goals should keep pushing you forward into new territory. So you should be setting goals constantly, new goals. Self-confidence. How confident are you with what you're doing? If you're feeling a lack of confidence, then you need to work on building your confidence, because when you feel strong about what you're doing, you're going to come across strong with what you're doing. So that's an element of it.
Building your confidence and maybe making sure that it could be coming from a real place. Maybe
Yes.
you're not doing as well as providing the results that you were hoping to provide.
Financial accountability, that's probably the biggest one I see with people who are trying to own their jobs and even own small businesses. It's so easy to put off doing the accounting work or having the accounting work done. And I guess the one thing I'll say about that might help motivate you in that arena is, money is the scorecard. That's how you keep score with whether or not you're succeeding. If you're not regularly looking at your income and expenses, if you wait till the end of the year to go to your accountant with a box load of receipts and paperwork, you have no score. You have no idea whether you're succeeding or not. So start thinking of the finance piece as the scorecard. Hard work? Are you working hard? Are you putting serious effort? Now that's not the same thing as a ton of time. Serious effort. Are you just kind of flopping by, or are you really trying to put effort into what you're doing? And then the last one is the same as the first key, which is innovation. Are you constantly innovating? Those 6 things, if quarterly, you'll kind of look at those 6 things. Risk-taking, which means are you being a reasonable risk taker? Are you going to the middle ground? Don't go to high risk because you'll lack the capital, and don't choose the sure thing because it lacks challenge. Find a medium level of risk that challenges you just enough to not put you beyond your capability, but challenges you in a way. Self-confidence. Strengthen your belief in your skills can positively shape the outcome of your enterprise. So be sure that your self-confidence level in what you're doing stays high. Being a hard worker. Put forth a strong effort, self-motivated and focused, especially when the skill can shape events. And then being a goal setter. Happiness is purposeful effort towards a meaningful goal. Let me say that again. Happiness is purposeful effort towards a meaningful goal. that sense of achievement of a new calling, you need some hard work. The accountable on the financial side, I've already kind of went into that a little bit. Make sure that you are profit. Make sure you're profitable. Do those accounting records. Keep score. And then the innovation. Keep doing new things, trying different approaches, weaving old ideas into new patterns. Those 6 things done in balance and checked on a quarterly basis will keep you excited about your business and what you're doing and what you're accomplishing and where you're going. And burnout becomes a non-issue. You cannot become burned out if you're doing those 6 things.
This is awesome. And you actually, I'm reading it right now on your website, have a little tracker, and I'll be sure to put that in the show notes, how people can get access to that. I'm 100% going to be filling it out. It's getting pretty close to the end of my quarter, so it'll be a new goal setting routine that I do. I do the goal setting every quarter. And I do my best to be accountable with my scorecard. It is something I push off, and it's something I hear a lot too. It seems like a lot of people push it off, and I don't know if it's because they just don't want to look at it, or with me, it's just detailed work isn't very much fun. So I know that it's important, and looking at all those other areas is absolutely going to be a good way to track that and see if I'm going in the right direction. And how do you score that? Just okay. So it looks like the tracker says grade between 1 to 7, and if you find that it's less than, you just go to maybe the lowest area and make sure you give a little bit
go
more.
to that lowest area and put some effort into. Just recognize the fact that one's starting to slip a little bit is putting you at risk for getting burned out with what you're doing. And let's be honest. Nobody starts a business because they love paperwork. Nobody starts a business to sell something they don't like or to provide a service that they don't enjoy doing. We're choosing this route because we love what we do. It deserves to be kept fresh. And you alluded to earlier, yes, every 5 to 7 years, something I do for myself beyond this little assessment is I set aside 10% of every dime that comes through the door, and I set it aside so that I build a slush fund so that every 5 to 7 years, I can back off my client load, take some downtime, and go through an assessment process of, what is different in the world? What has changed in the world that would impact my business? What's happening in the marketplace? What's happening with me? What have I learned? What are the new trends? What am I doing now that I wasn't doing before? Who are the clients I like now that I maybe wasn't thinking about before? I literally look at every aspect of my business and I reinvent myself, as you said. If they were to go to my blog post, I think it was maybe my first or second blog post, I literally put up an image of all the business cards I'd had up to that point, because I would change my colors. I changed my tagline. I have changed my domain name. I've changed what services I offer, what clients I market to. I look at everything, and I keep that slush fund. It allows me to back off from the business because I use those funds to keep the money flowing while I'm going through that assessing process. But I reinvent myself, and it's just a way to acknowledge how you've grown, how you've changed, how the world has changed, how the marketplace has changed, because all of, change is constant. All of those things are pounding at you. So that's a final tip I'll give is, find a way to take time away from your business to literally rethink the whole thing about every 5 to 7 years.
I like it. One of the things we connected over was a book that you were talking about. I still haven't read it yet, but I did watch a presentation on it. And that's something I like to ask guests at the end of every show. I think we'll make you a resource, this quarterly assessment, which I highly encourage people to check out. Is there any book that you might recommend to a listener out there that you want to get in their ears, in addition to all all the wonderful concepts that you just were able to share with us?
Related to this topic area, the book that I would recommend, if you haven't read it yet, is a book called The E-Myth. E for entrepreneurial, The E-Myth. The author is Michael Gerber. It was written quite a few years ago at this point, probably in the 90s. But he brings forward that spirit. How do you take that love that caused you to start your business to begin with, and how do you disseminate that throughout your company? How do you make sure that as you bring, whether it's a virtual assistant or a new assistant, or you go the business route versus the job route and you're bringing other people in, how do you transfer that passion and that love throughout your entrepreneurial career? Now, he uses entrepreneur in the sense that many people do, which just means I own a business, but I kind of have to define that a little more tightly for you, but he uses it in that context. But it's a wonderful book to stay at the heart of why you started your business. No matter where you take it, no matter how big it gets or small it stays, how do you keep your heart in the business? So that would be my book recommendation.
That is amazing. One of my first entrepreneurial books that I ever read, and actually just a few episodes back, episode 12, if you want to listen to an interview I did with Mr. Gerber. It was pretty incredible that at 80 years old, that guy had so much energy and still really in tune with those ideas that just have not changed since the 70s. People are failing the same way they failed before the internet, before the information age. It's a lot of what we just talked about here, not paying attention to those fundamentals and not getting their finances and not getting the marketing and not getting their technology where they need it to be, or as he puts it, as wearing the entrepreneur hat or the manager hat or the technician hat in the right order. And you're right, where you say the technology, like that's the technician. That's what a lot of people, they're passionate about what they do and they want to share it with the world. They just need to make sure they get those other two pieces. And I think your strategies on differentiation and innovation and renewal and finding the one or two strategies that work for you when it comes to marketing. You don't have to do it all. If you love hanging out with people and connecting with them, networking is a great option. If you feel like you're more into ideas and concepts and you like sharing them, speaking and writing might be a good way of going about things. Or I don't know what it takes to be good at social media. I'm actually interviewing a social media expert tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to that because that's an area I definitely struggle with. But thank you so much, Susan. This has been so helpful for me. I can't wait to re-listen to it, take notes, and pay even closer attention to what you've been able to put together and share from your 30 years of experience.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure.
And we'll make sure to put in the show notes the links to Susan's website as well as the bonus material and any other way she wants to connect. So thank you so much for tuning in. We'll connect next week with another episode of Able Business Radio.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Able Business Radio. Zach wants to help more small business owners like you make 1% improvements that add up to big results. Was this show helpful? Pay it forward. Subscribing and writing a review in iTunes is one of the best ways to help more people find out about the show. Thanks again for tuning in. We hope to see you here next Wednesday, where we will continue to share 1% improvements that will help you become a more useful, less stressed business owner.